Okay, so this is a Machshavah Lab shir in the true sense of Machshavah Lab, which is I don't know if we're going to get ideas. Well, we're going to get stuff. We're going to get stuff. I don't know if we're going to get like complete ideas, but this is what I'm working on for the article for this Friday. By that I mean today. So hopefully you can help me to come up with the ideas that I could write about it. As you may know, Vayakal and Pikudei have a reputation, which is that they are among the most difficult parshios of the Torah to like find stuff to talk about or write about, because Truma and Tetzaveh go through the halachos about building the Mishkan and the garments of the Kohanim, and then Vayakal and Pikudei just describe the execution of those halachos. So it is it's a near verbatim repetition. Granted, it's in a different order, and there are some details that are different here and there, but the challenge is to find things that are substantive, that are new, that weren't already talked about in Truma and Tetzaveh. Okay, so I found one pasuk. Every year it's the challenge, right? Like what to write about or speak about. Okay, so this pasuk is in Lamed Ches pasuk Ches. Okay, in Shmos, and it says Vayas es hakior nechoshes ve'es kano nechoshes. So he, and this is talking about Bezalel, made the who was the chief architect, made the copper laver, I think is probably the best word that is used, ve'es kano nechoshes, and the copper base, bimaros hatzovaos, with the maros are mirrors of the tzovaos, okay, which we're going to not translate for a second. Tzovaos, asher tzava'u, hu tzava'u, Pesach Ol Moed, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Okay, so obviously a question here is, what are these tzovaos, and why does the Torah single out what the copper laver and copper base were made out of, right? I mean, they got metals from all sorts of things, so why single this out? Okay, so before we do that, let me just show you a picture of what we're talking about here. So this is in that Koran Tanakh of the land of Israel here. So this is what it's talking about that was made, the basin and its stand. Let's just read what it says here. The priests used the basin and the stand to wash their hands and feet before the sacrificial service. So this is like an every morning thing. The lower part of the basin contained spigots for washing the hands and feet, while the stand at its base was essentially a large bronze saucer. Both the basin and stand were made of bronze. I always forget, what is the difference between bronze and the relation between bronze and copper? Yeah, Alex?
Isn't copper the one that oxidizes faster?
Okay, that's more than I know. It says here that it is, let me just see the Wikipedia. It's an alloy primarily of copper. Bronze is an alloy primarily of copper, commonly with about 12 to 12.5% of tin, and with the addition of other metals. Okay, fine. So it's not pure copper. I don't know what's the accurate translation of nechoshes. That's beyond my expertise. So both the basin and stand were made of the bronze from the mirrors of the women who served. Okay, that's how they translate tzava'u. The basin and its stand are not mentioned together with the acacia wood. Sorry, are not mentioned together with the acacia wood in chapters 25 to 28, but rather only after the discussion of the half shekel. Okay, fine. And then the mirrors are these things. Okay, it says mirrors today are made of plate glass with metallic backing, but this kind of mirror did not make an appearance until the Middle Ages. Archaeological excavations have uncovered mirrors from the ancient Near East that were small discs made of polished copper or bronze, like those mentioned in this verse, with ornate handles. Egypt, in particular, was an exporter of bronze mirrors, as attested in the El Amarna letters of the 14th century BCE. The only other reference in Tanakh to a mirror appears in Job 37:18. There, too, the mirror is described as being made of cast metal. Yeah. Okay, hold on just 1 second here. Yeah, all right, fine. So we're not going to read the other part here. Okay, so the question is, again, back to this. What are these sovaos who sava'u at the entrance of the tent of meeting? Okay, and just grammatically speaking, sovaos is from the root sadi vav aleph, and is a plural feminine noun. Okay, and then sava'u is also the same root. Okay, root is tzadi vav aleph, which is a plural verb. Okay, so Rashi we're going to examine primarily two Mefarshim. Okay, so Rashi and then Avraham ben Harambam. Okay, so I'm going to read the Rashi, and then I actually, since I was writing the article, I already copied and pasted the translation, but I want to read it in the Hebrew. Maybe I could put both here. Let me put both here. Okay. I'm not going to be able to display the English on the screen the whole time, but okay, let's go here. All right. So Rashi says like this: "B'maros hatovos," with the mirrors of the tovos. Okay. So who are these tovos? Benos Yisrael. So they're Jewish women. Okay. Everyone's going to hold their Jewish women, but Benos Yisrael hayu biyadan maros. The Jewish women had in their possession mirrors, shiros behen kashem miskashtos, that they would look at themselves when they were adorning themselves. I don't know. Miskashtos usually means with jewelry, but it might also mean like cosmetics. So I guess you could think of it as like, cosmetic mirrors. The af osan, and even these lo azvu milahavi lemelachas hamishkan linadvoso. Okay, I think that's how you read it. Even these, they did not withhold from bringing to the malach of the Mishkan to donate. Okay, so they donated these to the Mishkan. V'haya Moshe moes bahem. Moshe was about to reject them, or moes could be to reject or to be even disgusted by them. Why? Because they were made for the Yitzhahara, right? These are mirrors that were used for personal vanity and for probably associated with Egyptian makeup and cosmetics, things that we don't really place a high value on. So Moshe was going to reject them. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, but God said, "Kabel, accept them. Ki elu chavivin alai min hakol. They are more dear to me. These mirrors are more dear to me than everything. She'al yedehen ha'emidu nashim halalu tzivaos rabos b'mitzrayim. Because through them, these women established tzivaos rabos, many legions or hosts in Egypt. Okay, meaning we'll see why. It means that they had lots of kids. Okay, how so? When their husbands were exhausted from the crushing labor in the fields. Okay, and you got to remember in the Haggadah we say Vyar Elokim says Vayeda Elokim, and God knew. And in Haggadah we darshan that to mean that's Zoprishus Derech Eretz. This is the separation of marital relations. That one of the things the Egyptians were trying to do is do population control, and so obviously they had the whole kid killing, son killing campaign. But they also gave men labor to wear them out to the point where they were not. They thought that they'd be too weary and tired to procreate. Okay, so it was working, but what happened? So these women. Hayu holchos umolichos lahem ma'achal umishte umachilos osam. So the women would go out to their husbands in the field and bring them food and drink and feed them. But notalos hamaros, and they would take the mirrors. V'chol achas v'achas roa atzma imbala. She would see herself and her husband. So she's like picture like selfie, showing like themselves. Okay. Umishadlo mishadalto b'dvarim, and she would tease him. Or coax him with words. Now, I was weirded out by these words here, okay? Ani na'e mimacha, I am more beautiful than you, okay? I don't know if I just don't understand how flirting works, but I've never heard a woman say to try to get a man, I'm more beautiful than you. I think it's a little weird. So I was tempted to translate this as I'm too beautiful for you. Okay, because mimacha can mean the mem can mean too much, and that is basically that I can understand why a man is going to be riled up by that, because she's basically saying I'm out of your league, and that makes him want to reassert his masculinity or whatever. But then I had a whole long discussion about this over the last couple of days with people on Facebook, and they said that the same phrase is used in the Tanchuma about women competing with each other, saying I'm more beautiful than you are. And so it does seem to be I'm more beautiful than you. So maybe this is just a way that they flirted back then. I don't really know, but whatever it is. Okay. So she's trying to get him all riled up. And it worked. Through this, the women brought their husbands to have lust, okay, or desire, sexual desire. V'niz kakos lahem, and they coupled. They had relations. Umis abros, and the women became pregnant. V'yoldosham, and they gave birth there in Mitzrayim. Shnemar, as it says in Shir Shirim, tachas hatapuach urarticha. I aroused you under the tapuach. Now I know we translate tapuach to be apple. apple trees. I don't know if they had apples in Mitzrayim, so some sort of fruit tree. Okay, but this is the source also of why why the minhag is to use or not minhag, why the halacha, the minhag is to use apples in charoses, because charoses is a reference to the same incident. V'zehu shenemar, and this is what it means, the maros hatzovaos, the mirrors of the tzovaos. Okay, so tzovaos here, Rashi is learning from sivaos rabos, which means many legions or hosts. So Rashi is learning tzovaos. Actually, I'm going to just copy and paste the thing here. Tzovaos asher tzava'u, he is learning to mean equals the women who established hosts, okay, of Israelites in Egypt. Okay, that's how he is like. It's a very loose figurative meaning, and this is why we call, again, tzava means like a. We use this to refer to like an army, right? So like large regiments. Maybe regiments would be the better word. Okay, but now the question is why for the laver? Why for this kior, right? So you would expect him to say, because it's used for the Kohanim and it attaches to like the usual function of this, which is to wash the hands of the Kohanim. But no, he says, V'nase hakior mehem, and this kior was made with him, shehu lasum shalom bein ish li ishto, lahashkos mimayim shebasocho es shekinet la ba'ala. So these waters, or say this kior was made to give peace, to make peace between a man and his wife, to give her to drink from the waters that are in it, to the man who was jealous of his Shekina la ba'ala, the case of the man who was jealous of his wife, right? So this is about sota, right? So the case of sota is the man sees his wife hanging around in seclusion with another man, and he warns her. He does called kinoi. He expresses his jealousy by warning her not to seclude with a man. And remember, secluding with another man in general is usher because of yichud. So she's already doing something usher, but then he warns her not to do it again with this particular guy. If she does it, so then they have to separate unless they do the sota procedure, whereby she can assert her innocence. And they go through the whole procedure, and it culminates in taking the name of Hashem and erasing it into these bitter waters. And she drinks from it. And if she was unfaithful, then her reproductive organs explode, and the man who she cheated with, his reproductive organs explode. But then if she was not actually unfaithful, so then she is given bracha, and she becomes like more beautiful, and if she was infertile, then she becomes fertile, and like it creates peace between a man and his wife. So no mention of the Kohanim washing their hands. Okay, but this is because this is associated with Shalom bin Ish Ishto, and that was what they did in Mitzrayim. That the men and women were not together, and these women, ensured that they would continue to procreate, and that led to the creation of the Jewish people. So then that's why we make this kior out of that. Okay, so any questions on the facts of Rashi here? And we're not going to analyze it yet. Okay, I want to compare it to the Avraham and Rambam. But any questions on the facts? Oh, Essie's not here, so I don't have to wait like 30 seconds. Okay. All right. So okay. So hold on to these thoughts. Let's do Avraham and Rambam. Okay. And I already translated this as well. So let me just copy and paste this. Okay, Avraham ben Rambam is going to give two interpretations, which he is then going to relate to one another, and he says as follows. Okay, b'maros hatzovos, maros k'mashma'an, mar'aya b'arabit, shehanashim ro'os behen es penehem b'shas hakishut. Okay, so these are mirrors that the women used to look at their own faces when they were adorning themselves. Okay, so that's again same as Rashi there. Okay. Hatzovos, so he learns hatzovos as ha'ovdos, who serve. Okay. Now, usually, what word would you use for ovdos? You would use the word ovdos, that they serve, avoda, right? But he says that they use a term for service, which is associated with military service. Okay, because like I said, tzivaos are usually soldiers. So Rashi's learning soldiers in terms of their number. Avraham and Rambam is learning soldiers in terms of service, and he explains, Klomar, Hanashim shenaddu mimishkanosehen, the women who hold I think the other translation had something different. Give me 1 second. The better translation of Avraham ben Harambam. Let's see if I have it. Thing is cooperates with me today. Shemos 38:8. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to read it from here. Yeah, here we go. Asher not teshuas batein. They abandoned their homes. V'hismasru la'avodas Hashem. And they devoted themselves. They gave themselves over to serving God. Okay. Now, what does that have to do with soldiers? Just like the soldiers abandoned their neighborhoods, their residencies, and they go to the place, they travel to the place where they go to war. Okay, so first interpretation is these were women who basically decided to, I don't think he means abandoning their homes in terms of leaving their kids, abandoning them, but it means that the women back then were in these roles of being primarily in the home, and these women decided to devote themselves fully to avodas Hashem. Okay, what does that mean? Not clear. Okay, the Targum, actually, I forgot to incorporate the Targum into this. Targum says, similarly, he translates it as, they came to daven at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So, women cannot do the avoda, like the Kohanim do. I mean, just Yisrael also can't do that. But everyone can do avoda shavalev, which is davening. So these are women who devoted themselves to davening. Okay, according to the Targum. Okay, that's one interpretation. The Tam Hasheni, second interpretation, which is also going with the connotation of soldier, Hanashim shenilchamu b'ta'avosehen, the women who waged war with their taivas, with their instinctual desires, milchamas nefesh, who went to war with them with their souls, ufinu el hismodidus hanashama, and they devoted themselves to the strengthening. Hismodidus is a modern Hebrew word. I actually have to look that one up just to make sure I get it right. Hismoded, coping, contesting, struggling. I think struggling is probably the best one. So they waged war. They struggled with their taivas. The ufinu el hismodus neshama. They turned to the struggling of the neshama. B'hismasrus el hakel, by giving themselves over to God, el avodas Hashem, and to the service of Hashem. So, in other words, this is either analogizing them to soldiers because they left their roles in society and devoted themselves to a role of avodas Hashem. Okay, so that's external, or it's referring to them as soldiers because they waged war with their own taivas, like an actual soldier. And then he says, "Upir sheni zeh yaspik lo hapir sharishon." He says this second interpretation is in line with the first interpretation, because it's the purpose of the first interpretation. In other words, giving yourselves over to avodas Hashem. I mean, what is avodas Hashem if not devoting yourself to perfecting your soul and overcoming your taivas? Once they transitioned or developed towards prishus, towards separating themselves from their instinctual desires, Shibru es marosem, they shattered their mirrors. Lefi shelo haya lehen sorech, because they no longer needed them. V'hikrivu osan, and they offered them to the Mishkan. Vehein shinu es hakelim hamitukim l'shem hasagas hataiva v'tanugi ha'artzim, and they transformed tools which were designed for the acquisition, for the attainment of desires and earthly pleasures, l'kelim datim, into religious tools, hamitukanim, which were designed l'shem avodas hakel yisale, which were designed for the avodah of God, which is presumably washing the hands of the Kohanim. Okay, similarly, I want to pair this with Ibn Ezra, who says, I don't have a translation of this here. So he says, what's the deal here? Ki mishpat kol hanashim lisyafos. So the standard practice among women is they beautify themselves. Liros pneim b'chol boker. They look at themselves in the mirror every morning. B'maros nechoshes ozechuchis, in mirrors of bronze or glass. L'sakin hape'erim shel shehem al roshehem, to fix their the beauty that is on their heads. I assume that's talking about their hair. Haman Yiskan b'Sefer Yeshaya, This is what's talking about in the book of Yeshayahu. Okay, so women in Israel back then did what the Arab women do here, which I guess is what Ibn Ezra was familiar with. Okay, here he says now the part that's close to both Avraham and Rambam and the Targum. V'hine hayu b'Yisrael obdos Hashem. These women served God. Shesaru mitayvas ha'olam. They turned away from the taivas of this world. V'nasnu marosein nadava, and they gave up their mirrors as an offering. Ki'in lehem tzorech od lios yafos. They no longer needed the mirrors to make themselves beautiful. Rak ba'us yom yom el pesach olamod lihispalel v'lishmo divrei mitzvos. They came to the tent of meeting to daven and to hear the words of the mitzvos, to engage in learning. Okay, so very similar, but he's just specifying what the avoda was, which was davening and learning. Okay, so just to summarize here, Avram ben Ram is defining hatzovos asher tzava'u as the women who devoted themselves to service. Okay, i.e., they enlisted themselves in the army of Hashem, either by taking on avoda roles, okay, like Tefilah and Talmud Torah, or they waged war against their instinctual desires. Okay, those are the facts we're working with here. Okay, so what are the questions and problems on either Rashi or Avram and Rambam? In fact, you know what I'm going to do? Since I have the English here, I'm going to copy and paste this into the chat so I don't have to keep them on the screen. Oh no, Rashi's too long. Okay, hold on. Let me copy Rashi. Okay, so Rashi is 1 of 2, and then okay, chat, boom, and then Rashi 2 of 2. Okay, and then Avraham ben Rambam. Let's see if Avraham ben Rambam fits. Yep. Okay. Avraham ben Rambam. Okay. Yes, Tamar.
I think this is more like an observation than a question.
Sure.
But it seems interesting that these, I guess this is kind of a question. Like, are these opposite interpretations, or are they somehow like close to, are they compatible in some way? Like, yeah.
That's why I'm having a difficult time with the writing this of our Torah. Okay. So the question is, what is the relationship between Rashi's interpretation and Avraham ben Harambam? Okay, and I can think of 3 possibilities. Okay, are they the same? Are they just from different angles? But from different angles. Are they slightly different but consistent with each other? Or is there a machlokus here about something fundamental? Okay, and I think you can read them in all 3 ways. Okay, so that's really what I want to get to the heart of. Yeah, Ayala.
Just to make sure I'm understanding, so the Avraham ben Rambam, which woman is he saying did this? Like in Mitzrayim or these ones?
These ones, yeah, these ones. And remember also at this point in the story, then we are talking about the same generation that left Mitzrayim, but their act of avoda is in the midbar. Okay, whereas Rashi's saying it's those women. It's the women who did this in Mitzrayim. The implication also, by the way, is that it sounds like, I mean, we don't know for sure, but it sounds like what Rashi's describing is what lots of women did. Whereas you get the impression from Avraham ben Rambam that like this is a select group of women. I don't think all the women in like the 600,000 women like went and devoted themselves fully to avodas Hashem. But whereas the women did engage in populating, procreating. Ayala?
So also, what is Rashi saying that Moshe's Havamina was?
Good. Okay. So that's also a major question I want to understand here. Okay, hold on just a second here. So okay, what was Moshe's Hava Amina? Okay, meaning why did he reject these at first? And how did Hashem convince him of the opposite, right? And it's not just Hashem saying, no, it's okay, you can accept them. It's Hashem saying, these are more dear to me than any other donation, which you could say is hyperbole, but it still needs to be justified hyperbole, Okay, that's another thing. And by the way, you see that according to Avraham and Rambam, there is no objection on the part of Moshe. This is only in Rashi's interpretation. Yeah. Okay, what else? If there's anything else. Those are the two questions, by the way, that I wanted to answer. But there might be other ones. Yeah, Tamar?
I think this is the kind of question you can't necessarily answer, but maybe why did the pasuk use this language?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna broaden that slightly, which is and I also agree this might not be something that we can answer. At the end of the day, according to either interpretation, what are we supposed to get out of the fact that the pasuk said this in this way? Okay. And just to clarify, I personally think that it's going to be much harder to answer this according to Rashi than according to Avraham and Rambam, because here's the thing. Okay. And again, this is why, again, you know me, I gravitate towards Pshat more than Midrash, right? Not that Midrash is of lacking a value, but according to the plain Pshat of the Pesukim, there must have been women who gave up their mirrors, which must mean that they did break with their taivas to a certain extent, right? And to give the analogy, I think nowadays, if you told women and even men, hey, you know how you look at yourself in a mirror? Give up all your mirrors, because remember, these were the only ways that they had to look at themselves. Give up all your mirrors, give up any way that you have to look at yourself. I think that would be very hard for a person nowadays. And I think if they did do it, it would show a certain conquering of their taivas, but according to Rashi's, so in other words, Amram and Rambam, you can't deny his second interpretation that is what happened. Some women did give up their taivas, and the pasuk is calling them soldiers. So I think that's a much more likely pshat. But according to Rashi, you have to know this whole backstory and this conversation between God and Moshe, and and so it's much harder to get stuff out of the. It's much harder to see Rashi's interpretation in the plain pshat of the Pesukim. Not that makes it better as an idea or worse. Okay, Yael.
How did Rashi, I guess, interpret how it says in the pasuk shared sabu by the Petach Halamoy?
Right.
It sounds like current, not in the past.
Correct. So I think the way he's learning it is, I'm just trying to think if there's anyone who can support this. So I think he's going to learn it as the woman who established hosts. Hold on a second. I'm trying to think if there's a word in English. See, the closest word in Hebrew is to describe the verb is who gathered at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Rashi's trying to learn that these were women. Oh, hold on. I feel like there's a way to say this in English. Is there a word for gathering that is related to the word number? To like large quantities.
Amassing?
Amass. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. So he would say that. Excellent. So these are the women who amassed progeny in Egypt, who gathered en masse at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Yeah, I think that's the best I can do. Yeah, I know it's not so smooth, but maybe it's just hard to capture in the English.
So we see translating the words differently, like tsavot and savu, or
yeah. So I think they're both acknowledging that this comes from tsava, which is like a legion, like a large number of soldiers. But Rashi is taking the quantitative dimension, and Avraham ben Aram is taking the qualitative dimension. That Klal Yisrael is referred to as like God's army. So Rashi is saying that they built God's army, and they and Avraham ben Aram is saying no, they acted like the soldiers in God's army by devoting themselves to his service or by waging war with themselves. Yeah, Ayala?
Also, I mean, Rashi is clearly saying that that's why these mirrors are like part of the kior. But is Avraham ben Aram saying that? I mean, at the end, he says something like that. But
right, yeah. So I guess the question is also, how? I'm going to tack this on to question number one, which is, does this result in a different view of the like ta'am hamitzvah of the kior? Yeah, right. So Rashi, right, like we said, Rashi puts the emphasis on the sota. Avraham ben Aram puts the emphasis on avodas Hashem, which I think is very reasonable to assume. Yeah, they need to do this in order to do avoda. Like he's talking about the washing of the hands. Okay. I think these are the main questions. Okay, we can have more later. I want to add one more layer of facts in case it's relevant, and I'm going to do it in a way that is just to elaborate on Moshe's Havamina here. Okay, so this might partially answer a question too. So what do you think? So all Rashi said was that V'haya Moshe Mois Behem Mipnei Asuyin Liyitzar. Okay, so I want to just do a thought experiment here, just to convey where Moshe is coming from. Okay, so, and I'm not going to be explicit here. Okay, and you can fill in, I'm sure you can select many things. Okay, picture an object that is associated exclusively with sexual relations. Okay, get it in your mind. Okay, now picture a bunch of women going up to the Rav of your shul. Okay, and saying, hey, we want to donate these for you to make a Torah cover, a Torah scroll cover out of, or to make into part of the Ner Tamid, because we want to donate to the shul. Okay, so I think we can see why that would make Moshe reluctant, because people are going to look at this and associate to the primary usage of these things, which is for some sort of like, for a Yetzer Hara type thing, I mean, again, even cosmetic mirrors. I mean, I don't know makeup, but I'm assuming just from seeing like celebrities, having all these like makeup lines. I don't know. I assume there's a Kardashian that has a makeup line, or maybe multiple of them. So if you took like something that was distinctively like a Kardashian makeup mirror and decided to like make the crown on the Sefer Torah out of it, people look at that and be like, that's a little inappropriate, And it's not just a matter of like personal associations. There's actually an Isser in the Torah that supports this. Okay, I'd be extremely impressed if anyone gets this. Okay, does anyone know one of the lo sases d'oraisa that prohibits donating a specific object, or not donating, utilizing a specific object in mikdash purposes because of its association with sexual immorality? Anyone know what I'm thinking of? It's a weird mitzvah. Like if you're coming with a list of weird mitzvahs, this would definitely be like on the top 10. Brooke, I don't know if you and Fega got this far in your Minyan and Mitzvahs exploration yet.
I don't think so.
Okay. It is, drum roll, the Esnan Zona Umachir Kelev. Okay, so what is this? So it's in Devarim Chaf Gimel Yotes. Lo tavi Esnan Zona Umachir Kelev Beis Hashem Elokecha L'cho Neder Ki To'avas Hashem Elokecha Gam Shneim. Do not bring the wage of a, plain pshat is the wage of a harlot, okay, and a Machir Kelev, and the price of a dog, to the house of Hashem your God for any voluntary offering, because both of them are an abomination to Hashem. Okay. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I just want to read the. It's not 100% clear how to translate this. Okay, so I just want to read a couple translations. All right. So Art Scroll translates this as. And by the way, I do not know if this is relevant to our Sugya, but I wanted to read it in case it is. 23:18-19. You shall not bring a harlot's hire or the exchange for a dog to the house of Hashem your God for any vow, for both of them are an abomination of Hashem your God. So that's the I think the mainstream interpretation. Shadal gives an interpretation which I first thought was like really weird, and then I realized that he has support. So he says, Lo tavi ima tzibor v'ima kohanim medaber. So it's talking to the congregation and to the kohanim. Mechir kelev. I don't know how to pronounce this word or what language. This is in kainadis, which is in Hebrew. Ish mezuman lemishkav zachor, a male prostitute. Okay, so he learns that kelev does not mean a literal dog. He learns it as another word for the amount paid to a male prostitute. And he says lashon, and he gives support. Lashon kelev v'chein begalus yochanan. Okay, so he says male prostitutes are called dogs. Okay, and I don't know what this galus yochanan is. I don't know if that's like an apocryphal work. It says it calls male prostitutes dogs. The and the proof is kito avas, is because it uses the word toeva, abomination, which is, as we know, a reference to I assume he's getting that's a reference to like mishkav zachor, to homosexual relations. But kelev echad minivra'av. Oh, and then he gives dog lovers are going to like this part. An actual dog is one of God's creatures. You're not going to call a dog an abomination. Neither the dog nor the price that you pay for the dog. Okay, but the real proof, I don't know why Shadal doesn't mention this, is this pasuk is part of a 2 pasuk paragraph. Okay, and what does the first half of the pasuk say? Lo tihe kadesha mi benos Yisrael, v'lo yihi kadesh mi bnei Yisrael. You shall not have a female prostitute among the daughters of Israel, and you shall not have a male prostitute among the sons of Israel. And then it says, do not bring the hire of a prostitute or the mechir kelev to the house of Hashem your God. So it would totally make sense if mechir kelev means the money that you pay a male prostitute. Okay, so that's, even though this is not mainstream, that is I think a very good interpretation. Okay, so why does the Torah not want you to do this? So I'm just going to read from a selection here. So the Ramban says hazonos yasu v'nida shalehen mitzvos. Okay, so he says I don't know. It says, I don't know if that's a typo. I think what he means is the zonos, the prostitutes, would try to do, I assume, with their payments. I think that's what makes more sense. So I think it should be like nadava maybe. Let me just check my my Torah Chaim and see if there's a typo. Where am I finding this? Devarim 23:19. 23:19, Ramban. Oh, you have to vocalize it. Beneda, not nida. And neda is a phrase from Yechezkel, which I assume means like a donation. So they would try to donate things, to the Mikdash. Choshvos l'chapir al chata'an, thinking that it would atone for their sin, right? So in other words, these prostitutes would commit prostitution, and then they would think that if they donated the money to the Mishkan or to Korbanos, then that would somehow be give them kapara for their sins. Kamoshes yaskiru rabbeinu b'mashal shalahen gaifa b'tapuchaya umufalga levishaya. Okay, I don't know what that means. Lakach asar Torah esnan l'chol neder. That's why the Torah prohibited them to use this for any voluntary offering. Because that's really a further hate. So these are not any dogs. Okay, these are people who were hunters and guardians of the city. They would raise vicious dogs, mazikos as harabim, who would be harmful to the public. V'yidru b'mechirehem lios kofer lenafsham. And I guess because these dogs would actually do violence, they would donate the money that is associated with the dogs to atone for their souls. בפרשים אנשי הצייד, שיעמידו צרוס כלביהם בשעווה לפני עבודה זרה שלהם, רבים מהם בכל בייס עבודה זרה שיצליחו בהם. Okay, so there's some parallel thing in a base of avodah zarah that they would have like these dog statues. Okay, fine. But Mefarshim amru mipnei shehu derech bizayon. Okay, other Mefarshim say it's just because it's degrading. Sefer Chinuch gives another reason. He says, Mishrashim mitzvah lefi hakorban hu bal l'taher machshavas ha'adam. This is actually the one that I think is more relevant to our sugya, that korbanos come to purify the thoughts of people, and to perfect their actions through this activity. Uvios korbano ba mi esnan zona. If a korban comes from the wage of a harlot, shehi avera mitanefes, which is an avera that like is sullies or pollutes you. Shema yachshov be'es korbano ba'oso inyan ra. Maybe a person will associate to that thing when they are bringing the korban, the fagel machashavto ba'osa ha-machshavah ha'ra'ah, and their thoughts will become polluted with the thoughts of this evil activity and degraded activity. So same thing with the price of a dog, because a korban comes to atone for your soul. So for example, the Ramban Shita is that when you see the korban being burned or being cut up, you should think that think to yourself, that should be me. If not for the fact that God lets me substitute some of my possessions for this animal. And this imagination, this association will soften your soul and get you to do tshuva on your chataim. And you'll do tshuva and regret what you did. And you will decide to no longer sin. So he just gave a little summary of the idea of korbanos. It's known that dogs are vicious. And if you're thinking about these dogs, these vicious dogs, when you're bringing the korban, that will cause you to be stubborn and to and stiff-necked, and you will not regret you're doing your sin. V'im amna b'ni shalu divrei yaladus hein imam tisorer v'tam zakenim tikach. Okay, that's just encouraging a son to like think into these ideas. Okay, fine. So my question refers to something similar. My question here is, or not question. You see from here that Moshe Rabbeinu his worry is not unwarranted. There is a thing where we do not accept certain things for use in Kachim and the Beis Mikdash because of their negative association. So I think Moshe is entirely within his rights to say, oh yeah, a cosmetic mirror that is used for beautifying yourself, we can't make something that is used for avoda out of that. And then Hashem comes in and says, no, these were used for procreating, for setting up the legions of Israel, and therefore they're more precious to me than anything. Okay, so let's now try to answer our questions. Okay, so again, what's the relationship between Rashi and Avraham and Rambam? Are these the same idea but different angles? Are they slightly different but they're consistent, or is there an actual machlokus? And also, how does this play out in terms of how we view the kior? 2, what was Moshe's havmina and how did Hashem respond? And then 3, at the end of the day, what are we supposed to get out of the pasuk, and why does the pasuk express itself this way? Okay, any ideas? I'm depending on you guys. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late, and if this was already addressed, then you just dismiss this. I'll catch up later. I'm just a little confused because the activities that, even though they're involved in like Yetzer Hara, it's, well, first of all, presumably not like a chait, and then also there's no way to be involved in the mitzvah of puravu without being involved in this activity. So I just like a little confused about the framework. Yeah.
So that's a good question. So you're right that these are not associated with chait like the Zona case is. So it's not that severe, okay? But it is associated with the Yetzer Hara because, like the Avraham and Rambam says, the kelim, these are kelim that are made for the Yetzer Hara, that they're made to admire, for women to admire themselves and be involved in their own appearance. I do take issue with the fact that when you said it's not possible to be involved in procreation without this. It is. You don't need to indulge in something which is a value in the society like Egypt. Remember, these were Egyptian mirrors, where obsession with appearances. That is a value that is contrary to Torah, even though it can be utilized in something that's pru revu, but it's not necessary.
Okay. And I wasn't talking about the beautification part, just the involvement in the physical.
Right.
I mean, it just is a mitzvah that involves the physical Yetzer Hara.
Right. So I that's why I think that having the example of a Kardashian mirror, or or a cosmetic mirror, or some sort of like more overt,
something more crass.
Yeah, right. That people are going to associate to the value system that these mirrors were created to serve. And that seems to be what Moshe's reluctance was.
Okay.
Yeah. Oops. Okay, let me just say my only idea, okay, because this is all I got so far. All right, so I do think that these are and I'm not even going to say which questions I'm trying to answer. Okay, I'm just going to say the idea. All right, so I do think that these are two different ways to contend with the Yetzer Hara, okay, which is, according to Rashi, okay, Rashi is talking about how women in Egypt had these mirrors that they used to just to care about their appearance. And again, that's an Egyptian value. It's not a Jewish value. It's it is again, it's not an avera, but it's not a Jewish value to be so concerned with physical beauty. And certainly, I get the impression, I don't know if this is just bad history knowledge, but that makeup was a big thing in Egypt. And I don't know if that was the case in Moab, so this is a very, very Egyptian value. All right. But what did the women do there? They utilized it for avodas Hashem. Okay. And, you also have that midrash with Miriam that, I don't know where this midrash is stated, probably. I'm not sure where it's stated, that Amram was a leader in Shevet Levi and in the and Amram stopped procreating, and then Miriam said to him in this midrash, you're worse than Paro, because Paro's decree is only going to kill the boys, but you want to put a stop to everybody, and to all lives. And so it was definitely a thing that continuing to procreate was important, both because of pru revu and because this was building the nation, and because of the promise in the Bris Bein Basarim that that Aram's descendants are going to become a nation there. So here's the thing, though: these women did not change their values. They did not perfect themselves by overcoming their taivas. What did they do? They redirected their taivas to a purpose which is in line with avodas Hashem. Okay, so these women, for all we know, they were still attached to those taivas. Now, yeah, there's the point that I made on about the Avraham and Rambam earlier, that evidently these women did give up their mirrors, right? But because Rashi does not talk about the fact that they turned away from the world of taiva, like Avraham ben Rambam and Ibn Ezra did, I don't think there's a reason to say that Rashi believes that. In other words, you could, let's say, donate, just because someone gives tzedakah does not mean that they've broken their taiva for money, right? It means that they were able to overcome the taiva enough to be able to give up some of their money, but it does not mean that their values underwent a change in its entirety and they are no longer involved with money. Avraham and Rambam and the Ibn Ezra are both saying that these women overcame their taivas for their appearances and the physical. Rashi is not saying that. So I think that Rashi's, the idea that emerges from Rashi is that there is a channeling of the taivas towards an end that is in line with avodas Hashem, and that's like the idea in B'chol Levavcha is b'shnei yitzrecha, and you have to serve God with both the yitzers. And if you have aggressive tendencies like David and Melech, then wage milchemes shel mitzvah, and if you have sadistic tendencies, then sublimate them in terms of becoming a mohel or a shochet, or like we were talking about last night, if you are very, very involved with liking being on the level of preschoolers, then become a preschool teacher, and like harness it for the good. Yeah, tomorrow.
I'm not. I have a question, which is like, I'm not sure if this is the same thing as what you're saying or something slightly different.
Sure.
It seems like you could read the story that Rashi's saying, not as that the women had a problem with their taivas and they successfully rechanneled it to like do tshuva, but rather that there was a need for something that was good, and so then they achieved it through taiva, like using taiva. I don't know if that makes sense. Like the primary thing. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what prompted the woman to do this, but right. I feel like you can rechannel your taiva because you're having a problem with it and you need to.
Okay, right.
Or like, you're like sort of like doing tshuva on a bad approach to taiva.
Right.
That's like one way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I would say, based on the way I'm understanding Rashi right now, I don't even think that there's any teshuva involved in this. Like I think that like when I'm picturing, just I know Rashi's not saying this, but just picture women who are like super involved with their appearances, and in Egypt, that's all they, that's what they did, is like they're just always involved with their appearances. And they said, well, I recognize that there is a good in procreating, and so I'm going to use my beauty guru attachment and like go out there and like get my husband to be with me, and then we're gonna have kids, but I'm still attached to this. And then now it comes time for the Mishkan, they put out a call that they need bronze. Oh well, here's bronze. Like I don't really want to give this up, but Hashem is important, so I'm going to give it up. So I don't even like. I'm not seeing Rashi as in there's really any tshuva. I am seeing though that there is a level that they reach where they are going to be. They're not so attached to the mirrors that they can't give them up, and they're not so attached to like a purely beauty-oriented non-Puruvu thing that they actually like did procreate in Egypt, So like I wouldn't say that this is a tshuva thing, but according to Avraham and Rambam and the Ibn Ezra, it is tshuva. They're like, whoa, we have a problem here. We need to overcome our the taiva ways of Mitzrayim and overcome these, and now we've reached this point where we no longer need them. We're going to smash our mirrors, and in fact that's a thing that like with the where is it, hold on, with Hilchos Edus, it reminds me of, so one of the people who's puzzle for Edus, who's invalid for giving testimony, is someone who is like a gambler, like as a profession. Yeah. Hamasachik Bekubia, someone who's like a gambler. All right. And let's not get into the issues of what counts as that today, because people who play poker for a living, that was legally determined and mathematically determined to not be gambling. Right. That's I think that's the din. I don't know about halakhically, but that's the American din. It's a person who the only way they make money is gambling. Okay. Since he's not involved in establishing civilization, so we assume that he like derives benefit, is like dependent on his dice, which is a form of gezel. Even with like these other forms of gambling. Okay, so then he says, oops. So hold on. Yeah. So then what about if a guy like reforms, okay, and decides to like stop making a living off of that? So at what point does this guy who is a gambler for a living, at what point does he go back to being like legitimate for Edus again? Mishi yishabru es psifsin mi'atman v'yachazru behen chazara gemura shlo yasu v'afilu b'chinam. Okay, so in other words, actually, let me just get the Chabad translation. I'm not sure what these psisin are. 12:6. Hold on, I know this is a long example, but I think it's always good to connect this to halacha whenever we can. Edus 14. Six. No, wait, did I say 14:6? No, 12:6. 12. Yeah. When is considered that dice players have repented? When they break their dice on their own volition and manifest complete regret over their actions to the extent that they do not even play without monetary stakes. Okay. When they can play for fun, as we say, right? When is it considered that those who guide the flight of doves have been repented? That's another form of like gambling. When they break the tools they use to snare them and manifest complete regret over their actions to the extent that they do not do this even in the desert. Okay, so I that's the impression I'm getting here, is that these women conquered their taivas and broke their mirrors to show that they have completely no need for them. So that's like real tshuva. Yeah, Tamar.
It seems to me like you could read Rashi, the people described by Rashi, in a different way also.
Okay.
Which is, I think you could interpret it as being something on a much higher level, unless there's some problem with this, which is like that you could say maybe that the women weren't so involved in the beautification, but they saw that they needed to continue the nation. So then they were like, okay, so we're going to use this thing for that purpose.
Yeah, you could say that. I just, given what I know about Bnei Israel and Mitzrayim, I don't think that they were on a high level. And I think that if they had these mirrors, they were using them for Egyptian purposes, not for Jewish purposes as their default.
So then okay, because the Rav Avraham ben Harambam was later, and that's how this happened. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you had women who were completely breaking away from their taivas in the other opinion, like,
yeah.
Is it because it was later that's why you're saying it's
not just because it was later? It was they had the Makos and they had Har Sinai and they had the Anan, they had Kavod and they had a year's worth of learning with Moshe. You know, so like there was a lot of transformation they could have gone through at that point. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, by the way, so just to summarize what we're at right now, is I do think that whether or not they are disagreeing on like something fundamental, I do think that there are two approaches reflected in Rashi versus Avraham ben Rambam about how to deal with the Yetzer Hara. One is channeling it towards something that is of value in Hashem's eyes, and the other is overcoming your bad values and doing teshuvah and devoting yourself to the true values. And I think that those are two different things that are reflected here. And you know, I would love to be able to associate that with Rashi's focus on sota, which is this corner case use of the kior, and Avraham ben Rambam's focus on washing of the hands, which is a daily use of avoda. I think Avraham ben Rambam is definitely the clearer thing to see, because that is the essence of avodas Hashem, is devoting all of your actions to Yedias Hashem and away from the world of the taivas. Rashi gives this weird case of like, yeah, we give the sota water from the kior to bring peace between her and her husband, and therefore we want to make that vessel out of things that are associated with making peace between women and their husbands in Mitzrayim. It's just a much far cry, you know, but I would like to like associate it with this, like, you know, this channeling idea, but I'm not sure how to do it. I mean, you could say to a certain extent that with sota, you know, look, husbands are jealous of their wives all the time, but going through the sota procedure is the correct way to handle that. No, that's too much of a stretch. Yeah, Ayala?
I mean, also about sota, there's the idea where like even Hashem's name gets erased for the sake of peace between a man and his wife. So maybe it could, like, that's like a demonstration of the importance of a relationship, like in marriage. That's a
good point as well. That is another idea of relationship in this kior thing. Yeah. Let me show you one more approach that was suggested by the footnote guy. This is Rabbi Maimon Moshe. I think his name is Moshe ben Maimon, but it's not the Rambam. It's the guy who does the editing of this edition of Avraham ben Rambam. So what he says is, so he says like this: Nira sheyesh laharchiv hadibur benosizeh. So aval I don't know. Lamed ayin ayin is rak atan shekinir sheyesh. Here we go. Yesh lekasher lezeh es inyan hakorbanos. So he says that this whole thing is reminiscent of korbanos. Sharambam b'mor nevuchim gimel lamed beis birsh inyanam hu lakachas peulos shahayu nohagos la'avodah zara u'lechavnam la'avodaso yisale. That the Rambam's whole theory on korbanos is to take activities that were done for avodah zarah and to reorient them to avodas Hashem. There were those who saw in this approach, meaning the Rambam's approach here, a huge disgrace and a degradation of the sacrifices. So the Ramban hates that approach of the Rambam, right? For many reasons, but one of his arguments is he says, you're making the table of Hashem filthy, because according to the Ramban, korbanos have an intrinsically good purpose, and according to the Rambam, it's just no, really, it's intrinsically bad, but we're just taking avodah zarah stuff and redirecting it to Hashem. So the Ramban really doesn't like that. V'hamaharit bedrashos safnas paneach shelo reish parshas vayikra tama aharambam mimikra male. So I don't know who the Maharit is, but in his drashos of safnas paneach, he is astonished at the Rambam from a pasuk in Devarim Yud Beis Lamed. Pentidrosh lelohem lemor echa yavdu hagoyim he'ela es Elohem ve'ezeh king gamani. There's a pasuk that says, lest you inquire after their gods and say, how do these goyim serve their gods? And I'll do the same thing to Hashem. So, and he's saying that that's essentially what the Rambam is saying that we do with korbanos. We're taking things, methods of avodah that were used for avodah zarah, and we're using them to Hashem. Bekushia zo hi al derech pirsh harav Avraham ben Ezra haramban sham shepushu ese king gam ani lashem yisale. So that explanation of Devarim Yud Beis is according to Avraham ben Ezra and the Ramban, who say that I will do these same actions to Hashem. Aval hamizrachi sham bir b'shitas Rashi shepushu ese king gam ani lelohehem. Okay, then there's another interpretation that says, no, I'll do these things to avodah zarah. Right, it's a side point. Okay, but then he says like this. Amnam laor hamuvuar b'Rabbeinu sheshevahu lahaktish l'shamayim dvarim hamiyuadim l'chulei chulin. But we see that according to the Rambam, there is it's praiseworthy to take things that were devoted to non-sacred endeavors and to devote them to God. Yitachin, it's possible to say, according to that, shekin hi shitas Rambam odos avodos hakorbanos, that's what the Rambam is doing with korbanos. Shekol ki hai gavna ein ze ganai ela shevach, that all of the korbanos are not a degradation. It's really a praiseworthy thing. The inyan nichbad, and it is something that is noble. Shemasru l'shamayim es darche avodos ha'elilim, that we take the derech of avodah zarah and we give it over to Hashem. Kamaros hatovos, just like these mirrors. But pasuk shevi marit misyachas l'derech avodah hamufuretes shaisa nohagos etzlam shebezeh ha'ikar hu laharchik me avodah zarah v'lo lihidamos leha. Wait, let me see if this part's relevant. I think that's just going back into the particulars. So he's trying to say here that like perhaps there is an idea that like the paradigm of avodah is taking something that was used for bad purposes and then devoting it to good, which is after all how Avraham ben Rambam expressed it. He says that they took these kalim. What did he say? Shinu es ha-kalim ha-metukanim l'shem hasagas ha-taivas I have the English here. They took the kalim, they transformed tools which were tailor-made for the attainment of lust and earthly enjoyment into religious tools which were tailor-made for the service of God. That's the essence of avodah, according to the Rambam, who holds that all of avodah was that's what happened. Is God took these things that were for avodah zarah and transformed them into things for divine service. Whereas you don't get that idea from Rashi. Of like again, it was just taking or at least you don't get that idea strongly from Rashi. See, also there's the fact that Rashi was talking about a historical thing. In other words, like this. Here's a good nafkamina, right? According to Avraham ben Rambam, let's say this had taken place 100 years later, okay, and the Mishkan got delayed, and women came up and donated their mirrors, saying we've parted ways from our evil involvement with Taiva, and we're devoting this to Hashem. According to Avraham ben Rambam, that would be exactly the same thing. According to Rashi, no, it's specifically these mirrors used by these women to make these legions in Israel. But if women nowadays came and devoted and gave their cosmetic mirrors up, it wouldn't express that idea, So that leads me to believe there's also something, in the historical role that these mirrors played in establishing the Jewish people, that is different than just expressing this idea in doing tshuva. Yeah, Ayala.
So just to develop what I was saying before a little bit,
Yeah.
Maybe like the institution of marriage itself is kind of an expression of this idea of like directing desires towards Avodah Hashem through Peru Revu and
interesting
such. Yeah. And then like Sota, I guess, is like the ultimate idea or expression of how the Torah is like plays a role in that and like values the kedusha of that to such a great extent that Hashem's name is erased.
Okay, good.
So that's incorporated into the
good. And certainly in Mikdash, because I don't know of any other, I mean, maybe there are other examples, but I don't really know of other places in Avoda in Mikdash that even relate to the idea of marriage, like, yeah, fine. You have like korbanos when you have like Isha, ki tazriya v'yalda zachar, but like, that's not marriage and relationship between husbands and wives. So you're saying that maybe according to Rashi, then we're trying to that the idea reflected in the kior is the stance that the Torah takes on marriage, which is both about shalom bein adam leishto, and also the results of that, the fruits of that, the literal fruits of that, with the women in Mitzrayim, that they engage in Puru Revu to make Am Yisrael, which is like, those are the two things that like show the Jewish value of like of the purpose of marriage, really, which is procreation, and then also producing future generations of Jews for Am Yisrael. That's a good idea. And according to Avraham and Ram, this has nothing to do with marriage at all, right? It's just devoting your taivas to overcoming your taivas and devoting yourself to avodas Hashem. And this one happened to be with women, but men have taivas also, and they could, if they gave up their I don't know what it would use, what would be the equivalent of the mirrors, but it could be the same thing. Yeah. Okay. Can we understand the machlokes between Moshe and Hashem? I think we understand each side, right? Like that Moshe was reluctant because these things by association are designed for these sexual purposes, and then Hashem is making the points that everyone's been making. Yeah, Tamar.
This is not the most enlightening answer, maybe, but it sounds like Moshe didn't have this fact of how the women were relating to it.
I would not assume that that's the case, because I think if anyone knew, then Moshe would know that this happened. So that's why, and which makes it harder. I agree, but like you have to assume Moshe had this fact and was still worried. I mean, you don't have to assume that, but I have a hard time believing that Moshe, if this was something that happened throughout the nation, and this is how the numbers got so big, like it'd be equivalent to, in China when they had like the one-child policy of like, not knowing that there were women who like tried to find various ways around that, or not knowing that they like, killed their daughters, or like when the one-child policy was reversed, if there's a policy that governs, or let's say like birth control in America, right? When birth control was invented, that drastically changed like, procreation and sexuality and stuff. I have to assume Moshe knew about this. Yeah, Yael?
What are the tam of mitzvah of the kior in general?
I mean, I think that's what we're getting from these very few clues we have. You have washing your hands for the Kohanim to do avoda, and presumably there are ideas there, okay? Like, and by the way, according to the Rambam, it's a whole machlokas why we wash our hands in the morning. So you have the Ruach Ra, there's basically three opinions. You have the Ruach Ra issue. Actually, I think I can summarize this from reading something. I'm not going to go to, there's the Ruach Ra issue, that there are people who hold that there's a physical state of your hands that is dangerous, and you have to like cleanse them for hygienic purposes, or a spiritually impure state that is somehow dangerous. The second reason is the Rashba's idea, which is that there's an idea of Chadashim Labakarim Rabba and Munasacha, that it's like you were created anew each day, and there's an idea of washing in order to like somehow associate to that idea. I don't know what that is. And then there's the Rambam's idea, which is it's washing before Tefilah, because Tefilah is a form of avoda. You need to wash your hands before you do Tefilah. To the point where the Rambam really holds you have to wash your feet, hands, and face before Tefilah, but just we're not knowing to wash our feet nowadays because we don't wear sandals. So yeah, we'd have to understand what is that idea, and that would be the primary use of the kior. And then the secondary use is this the sota thing, which is wrapped up in the philosophy of sota, that like Ayala mentioned that like you erase the name of Hashem into the waters of the Sota to show that God is willing to forego his name to make peace between a man and his wife, because the whole purpose of the Torah is shalom. Beyond that, I don't really know. Yeah, Ayala?
Can you say that Machshavah Lab is just like what we were saying, that although this is a true idea,
yeah,
it's still like having this in the Mishkan is going to be dangerous because of what people can like relate to or think about. But somehow Hashem saying no, like on the contrary, that like the idea of like directing everything towards Avodat Hashem is like a fundamental idea of the Mishkan.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that, and I'm going to call this the, I think it's a true answer, but I'm going to call it the cop-out answer, because it is a cop-out, which is that when it comes to chukim, we can't really ultimately know either the reasons or where to draw the line. Okay. And I was giving this analogy. I wrote an article about this called Does Hashem Hate Unibrows, which is about how, the Kohanim are not allowed to serve in the Mikdash if they have any of these, like, I forgot how many blemishes there are, tons of blemishes, like one of them is unibrow, one of them is if they're albino, one of them is if they have like a wandering eye, So the big question is like, that seems on the surface to be prejudice, does the Torah really value physical appearance? So in the article, I argue that no, in fact, if you look through all of Torah, you will find 0 cases where we have negative views or have any restrictions on people with physical, deformities. And in fact, to the contrary, when, in other cultures, when you have someone who is like, has a limp or has like a deformity, they assume that those people are like inferior or are possessed by demonic spirits or like they've been cursed. But what do we do when we see someone who's deformed? We say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam mishaneh habrios. We use them as a vehicle of praising God, that blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who makes a variety among people, and we use it as shevach, and we never say that these people are on a lower level. Only in Mikdash, because Mikdash has to have this awe that you will go there and you have this like the analogy is like in the same way that up until like the last, decade, then clothing companies would advertise using purely attractive models, and only lately have they been using people with like different body types. We want people to be in awe, and like you want to look at the Kohanim and fantasize, if only I could be this kind of person. So it has to be like this pristine thing, and that's why the Torah like has these physical restrictions. Now you can ask, well, why does Hashem choose to like change human nature by forcing people to accept physical blemishes in all other areas, but by Mikdash he draws the line and says, no, we're going to cater to human nature. Answer, we have no way of knowing how Hashem draws the line. So it's possible that Moshe has a good argument and Hashem has a good argument, but where exactly you draw the line, like only God can make that judgment call, and therefore we don't need to define the machlokes in any like conceptual term and like show beyond what we've said. Similar example is in this week's parsha as well. That let's just look this up really quickly. There is a precious stone called the kumaz, which was used in the construction of, let me just see if there's a Rashi on this. Okay, it is in this week's parsha. I just don't know. Oh, so yeah, it's definitely in this week's parsha. So Lamed Hey Chaf Beis. So Kumaz is my book's all the way over there. I'm not going to get it. I forgot what this modern stone is, but Rashi says about the Kumaz. Yeah. So Kli Zahav, Hu Nasun Keneged Oso Makum Shel Isha. Okay. So this, let's just see what the English translates here. Kumaz was a golden ornament worn by women on their private parts. Okay. Our rabbis explain the name Kumaz as an acrostic. Kan makom zima means here is a place of licentiousness. Okay, so this was like talk about things that are like associated with things that are inappropriate to think about. Yet this was used for the Mishkan, and the Mefarshim grapple with, well, how is this used for the Mishkan, and why is that not a problem? And like Moshe had this objection here. So one of the things that they say is like it was transformed into a way that was unrecognizable, so like it was not associated anymore. But I don't know if it's so simple that like if I know that this was used in the thing, maybe my association to it is enough to like invoke all of the reasons that the Sefer HaChinuch mentioned about the wage of a harlot. Look, if the wage of a harlot is going to create these negative associations, certainly the jewelry that's worn on women's private parts is going to like bring up that association. But look, this is the realm of chukim. Only Hashem can draw the line, So Ayala.
I think this was mentioned before, but I feel like it is significant that in the case of the harlots, that is something like something usher, I guess. Versus here, it's like showing how to direct it in a mutter way.
Right. That's true. Right. Is you have a couple of things going for you with the harlot case. One is that it's usher. Second is what the Ramban said, that if this was practically a misguided attempt to get kapara for their avonos, then the Torah had to like prohibit that. That's like a way of bribing God almost. Yeah. Okay, so let's sum up what we have, and I'm happy with what we have. I didn't know how far we were going to get, but basically we see from here there are whether or not Avraham, Rambam, or Rashi are arguing, there are definitely two ideas of how to use the Yetzer Hara in Avodas Hashem. Okay, Rashi is putting emphasis on taking the Yetzer Hara drives and activities and then applying them in ways that are in line with the Torah values. And that was memorialized, I don't know, memorialized is the wrong word. It was permanently incorporated into the Kalim of the Mikdash in the form of the Kior, which is associated with this idea as well, like Ayala pointed out, of like what the Torah's stance is on a man's relationship with his wife, or wife's relationship with her husband, which is that what this relationship is about at its core is perpetuating the human species and the Jewish people with all those Torah values, and that it's built on a foundation of shalom, which even overrides God's name. So like all of those ideas are embodied in the kior and in the acceptance of this donation, despite its associations with like things that are like dealing with the Yetzer Hara. The other idea you have is Avraham ben Rambam and the Ibn Ezra, which is that these Kalim were given by women who transcended their attachment to Taiva and devoted themselves to Avodas Hashem. And that is the whole point of the Avodah and the Mishkan in general, is to devote yourself to Yedias Hashem and away from the world of the Taiva. And it's very, very fitting that they take these tools that were used for the Yetzer Hara and then repurpose them for Avodas Hashem. And that's an idea in sublimating your Yetzer Hara and doing teshuvah on the way that you used to, indulge in this. That is an intrinsic idea in Avodah as well. So these are two ideas that we see in the Avodah, and whether or not there's a disagreement, there's certainly disagreement in like how the kior is being framed, but I don't think we have to say it's a disagreement in how, like, a fundamental issue about how to deal with your Yetzer Hara or anything like that. In other words, the same way that there's a disagreement with the Ramban and the Rambam on, are korbanos intrinsically good or are they a concession to human nature? I don't think there's a machlokes on that level that we have to posit here. Okay, that was good. Now, hopefully I can write it in some fashion. But this was very helpful, and I'm glad we got to have a shiur. I enjoy Q&A also, but it's nice to have a shiur. So thanks for coming. And I made a mistake last night, by the way. I think I said at some point that we have 2 weeks left on Thursday night shiur. Maybe I didn't say it, and I just thought about it, but I realized that so next week is the 23rd. So we Bli Neder will have Pirkei Avos shiur that night. But then the next week, I actually am flying out on Thursday night back to Seattle. So the schedule is to have one more night of Thursday night shiur before Pesach, and then I'm pretty sure I'll be able to do a Friday morning shiur from Seattle on the 31st. But next week should be normal. And I think we'll try to do Pesach stuff. I'm still taking suggestions. I want to actually, for next week's Pirkei Avos, do a Pesach related Pirkei Avos. I'm going to try to prepare that. But I'm open to ideas about what you want Friday shiur on. Okay. No promises, of course. Okay. Have a good Shabbos. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.